The Uncharted Legacy Remaster, recently released for the PS5 and PC, follows the bombastic adventures of Nathan Drake and Chloe Fraser. It is beautiful, fun, and touching all at once, and this remaster was a great excuse for me to replay one of my favorite series and really just makes me want more stories in the Uncharted universe. But this remaster is missing a pretty critical piece of the Uncharted puzzle that has been a staple of the series since Uncharted 2, and that is the multiplayer mode. Now, it kind of makes sense. The Naughty Dog multiplayer team is busy making their first ever standalone multiplayer game, Factions 2, and you have to imagine for them to have to remaster this multiplayer mode and bring it to a brand new PC player base, it would be a lot of work. But regardless, this mode is very much missed. It was a great way to re-experience the deeply satisfying action-adventure gameplay from the Uncharted narrative in a PvP and PvE setting. The gameplay and gunplay is fluid and unique compared to many other multiplayer shooters, and it has this great incorporation of the rope swing mechanics, the sliding, and your favorite guns throughout the series. But despite all that's so good about this game, it doesn't often come up as one of the great multiplayers. Even Naughty Dog's other underrated multiplayer, Factions, tends to get more limelight than this series. And the support for this game was perhaps the most short-lived of all of Naughty Dog's multiplayers. And even hardcore Uncharted multiplayer fans tend to pour hate on this game in favor of its PS3 predecessors, as those gamers do not really hold Uncharted 4 multiplayer in high regard. Dr. Pooplove here, and today I want to talk about why Uncharted 4's multiplayer is overlooked and underrated. And stick around to the end, because I want to talk about whether we will ever see another Uncharted multiplayer in the future. But let's get right into it. And the first reason that this game is underrated is it came out with some major deviations from the original Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 3 multiplayers. Now, even though I did not play a ton of these other multiplayers, I can totally empathize with why this is a problem. You had the introduction of rope swinging mechanics, sliding, a down state with reviving, AI sidekicks, mysticals, and loadouts, with no ability to pick up weapons on the map, just to name some of the major changes that were made. And these changes essentially turned this multiplayer into a different game entirely, as almost a blending of the original Uncharted multiplayers with parts of Factions, as well as other popular multiplayer shooters that were out and were hot at the time. And in many ways, it worked as a package. It was a fun multiplayer, and surprisingly, the sidekicks and mysticals didn't end up being as bad as many people thought. But the hardcore fan base that grew up playing this multiplayer franchise were very unhappy with all these changes, and were largely not on board for this new entry. And who can really blame them? They changed, honestly, too much of the DNA. I mean, this tends to happen when a new multiplayer comes out in a series where some of the changes turn off some of the players, but Naughty Dog really did a complete overhaul and made too many changes at once, without really giving much consideration to their built-in fan base, who were frothing at the mouth for a new Uncharted experience. It seemed that Naughty Dog was more interested in appealing to a new audience than making sure that their already built-in fan base would show up for this game. Another major reason that Uncharted 4 multiplayer was underrated is that a lot of the modes and features were late to the party, and some requested things didn't even make it at all. A co-op mode, for instance, was a staple of the original multiplayers, but it was not available at release. And I remember almost every post Naughty Dog made about the multiplayer was followed up with several questions as to where is the co-op, and it took them quite a while to finally bring it to the game. This was also the case with a classic mode, which would allow the hardcore Uncharted 2 and 3 fans to play the game in the original way that they loved, with weapon pickups and no revives. But this also took a while to come out. The game also launched without a leveling system, which I guess was a philosophical choice, but this gave less for players to strive for and to try to achieve, and reduced some of the stickiness that this game should have had. Plunder was released on time, but it was glitched, and it had a different player count requirement, and this essentially killed the beloved mode's chances of ever being successful. And while Naughty Dog released 2 classic maps, they never really dived deep into their catalog of beloved classic maps that would have given this game so much more life. All these things made this game not feel content complete at launch, and many who were waiting for some of these features to come lost interest during the long wait, and this led to a drop-off in players. Okay, now the third reason Uncharted 4 multiplayer was underrated is what I can best describe as it was watered down and lacked character. Now what I mean is the perks were watered down. Nothing felt particularly too strong. Largely, I'm sure, in part to avoid having things become too OP, but it also meant that whatever you really put on your loadout, it didn't really feel like it had a whole lot of weight to it. But also, the cosmetics were watered down, with too many boring reskins diluting the item pool, and essentially trying to force either a huge grind through a lot of bad items to get what you want, or just giving up and purchasing what you wanted through microtransactions. And there were also too many guns, and many of them just felt slightly different from one another, especially the assault rifles. It was really hard to tell the difference and to understand what made one better or one worse. In the original Uncharted and even Factions, the guns were much more unique and the number of them were more digestible. But here you just had too many to choose from, and it was really hard to understand the difference. And even the maps in this game lacked some character, as they all kind of felt the same. It was really weird for me because I don't have a favorite map, but I also don't have a least favorite map, because a lot of these maps just kind of felt the same. And now let's get to the fourth reason this game is underrated, and that was that the window of dev support was very small. This game was supported by the devs at first, who definitely worked hard to bring to this game a lot of what fans were asking for. But this game seemed to be the least supported Naughty Dog multiplayer yet, because they stopped supporting it pretty much soon after launch. And this is probably because the money they were making did not justify the support, but it did leave players who love this game largely forgotten about and without any new content. As I stated earlier, there were so many maps and things from the first 2 Uncharteds that could have been utilized and repurposed for this mode. I mean, imagine if all they did was simply port those 2 modes over from the PS3 as is. I'm sure that's easier said than done, but that could have gone a long way for continuing to breathe life into this game. But all of this makes me wonder, will we ever get another Uncharted multiplayer? I do think we will get another Uncharted game, but where in today's multiplayer landscape does a new Uncharted belong? And will they abandon it in the next entry? Certainly, you would imagine that with Sony's big live service strategy, that Uncharted multiplayer could live again. But it would be interesting to see what form it takes and whether it will share any of the same DNA with the original multiplayers. But while we wait to see what the future has in store for this amazing multiplayer franchise, if you want to hear about why Naughty Dog's other multiplayer, Factions, is so underrated, you should check this video out. But otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.